offer a path to citizenship to hundreds of thousands of immigrants who are married to U.S. citizens and living in the United States legally, well, illegally, that is, dealing a blow to a program the administration has touted as a key to his being Joe Biden's pro-family initiatives. And federal prosecutors ask an appeals court judge to restore Donald Trump's classified documents case, pushing back on the former president's claim that Jack Smith's appointment as special counsel violated the Constitution. And in some other news with Donald Trump, he plans to name his former rival, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, a one-time Democrat, as honorary co-chairs of his presidential transition team. And Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, says the Biden administration pressured Facebook to censor COVID-19 content during the pandemic. Zuckerberg vowed that the social media giant would push back if it ever faced such demands again. This is the news of the day, and this is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. This is hour 2 of Areva Martin in real time, and this is the hour where we go deep, where we dig behind those headlines and bring you those stories that people are talking about. Well, today, you may have seen the Washington Post story about Governor Tim Walz. The story came out on August 21st, just a couple of days ago. And it's a story about how Black women helped to shape the politics of Tim Walz after the death of George Floyd. Now, Walz has been praised by some activists, Black women and men activists, for how he handled the aftermath of George Floyd by appointing Keith Ellison as the independent counsel who was responsible for putting together that prosecution team that successfully prosecuted those officers involved in the death, the murder, that is, of George Floyd. Others, even in the Black community, have been critical of Tim Walz, saying they were disappointed that he didn't go far enough, that he was involved in the Black Lives Matter or the movement for social justice as long as it was in the headlines. And after the headlines faded, that he too lost interest. And then you have Republicans who are saying that he is soft on crime, that he let rioters and looters burn a police station to the ground in 2020 during those protests, and that he allowed individuals to burn and destroy hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of property. So depending on who you talk to, there is a different story and narrative about Tim Walz, the nominee for vice president selected by Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket for the Democratic Party, who is out going to battleground state, talking to voters and promoting his Midwestern cred, his credibility as an everyday guy, a football coach, a public school teacher, a public school administrator that can relate to everyday people. Well, when the Washington Post wanted to do a feature on Tim Walz and better understand his politics, especially following the murder of George Floyd, they went to Minneapolis and they talked to some of the women who have been most involved on the ground in trying to reform the police department in the state of Minnesota and across this nation. And 2 of those women are joining us today. Tashara Garraway, she's the founder of Family Supporting Families Against Police Violence. She lost her partner to police violence and has been just a steadfast advocate on the ground. She has had numerous interactions and conversations with Governor Walz. She, in fact, introduced him to many of the families who've lost loved ones to police violence. The other woman prominently featured in that Washington Post, article is Nakima Levy Armstrong. She's a civil rights attorney and former president of the Minneapolis NAACP. She too has been deeply engaged with Governor Walz in efforts to cause him to understand the structural racism that is pervasive in systems, not only in Minnesota, but really across this country. So Tashara Garraway and Nakima Levy Armstrong are joining me. And also in this hour, Jerome Richardson. He's an activist for families, supporting families against police violence. They're going to be talking about their relationship with Governor Walz, what perhaps isn't in that Washington Post article, what isn't in many of the articles that have been written about the governor as he is making his introduction to the country and asking people to vote for him and Kamala Harris. What do we need to know about his stance and his policies on police violence, particularly given Donald Trump's pronouncement today that when he is president again, he is going to end the Biden administration's wide-reaching efforts to curb abusive policing. He's promising to restore stop and frisk. He's promising to transfer military equipment to police departments. He's promising to give local law enforcement agencies the right to engage in deportation of immigrants. And he's talking about and promising to deploy the National Guard to fight crime. So we got a lot to talk about in this hour, and we have the best people possible to address this issue, not just of Governor Walz and his stance on police violence, but also Donald Trump's pronouncement about how he would handle policing in this country if he's reelected. We got a dynamic panel, and we are going to get right to it after we take a brief news break. So when we come forward, we will be joined by activists from the Minnesota, Minneapolis community, all of whom have had some relationship with Governor Tim Walz. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580. Tabitha Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition. With powerful new contributions from today's leading voices, this 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later today.
Martha was ready to switch to a career in IT.
There's always a need for IT specialists, especially with AI coming out and cybersecurity. It's practically recession-proof.
My Computer Career even provides job placement help.
The career specialists, they're very helpful. They care about you as a person. You're not just a number to them. I would recommend My Computer Career wholeheartedly to anyone.
Take the free career evaluation today. Become an IT pro in just months with zero experience at mycomputercareer.edu.
What's wrong?
My travel rewards card didn't earn enough miles for my vacation.
Are you crying? Are you crying because of that other credit card?
Uh-huh.
Well, switch to the Capital One Venture card. Venture lets you redeem miles on any travel purchase.
Really?
Yep, and you earn unlimited double miles on every purchase every single day. The Capital One Venture card. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, home of the 2024 Climate Justice Campaign. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA reminds you that when we fight, we win, and we don't black down. LA Community Action Network, or LA CAN, was formed in 1999 when 25 residents of downtown LA came together and acknowledged the problems that existed in their community and made a commitment to do something about those problems, to stand together, organize, and become a force in the community that demands change. Civil rights and preventing the criminalization of poverty are their core projects. In addition, they take on women's rights, the human right to housing, and healthy food access. LA CAN also has projects focused on economic development, civic participation, voter engagement, and community media. While downtown LA remains their home base, with a particular emphasis on the Skid Row community, in 2007, they expanded their housing and healthy food access work into South Central Los Angeles. LA CAN believes that power for low-income people and people of color is achieved through a large, active, and well-informed member base that utilizes a multitude of methods to advance their messages and goals. If you'd like to join the Los Angeles Community Action Network and organize people to fight back against oppression, please visit cangress.org. That's cangress.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back, and we're talking about Governor Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who accepted the nomination to be on the ticket with Kamala Harris. He is now the vice presidential nominee for the ticket that we're going to be voting on in November. Kamala Harris at the top of that ticket, Governor Walz second. He was selected by Kamala Harris after a vetting process that involved other governors, like the governor of Pennsylvania, also the senator from Arizona, Mark Kelly, and others who were also considered potentially picks for VP who would bring something unique to the Harris ticket. But at the end of the vetting process, it was Tim Walz. He introduced himself to the nation on Wednesday night at the DNC. We got to meet his wife, Gwen. We saw his son, Gus, his daughter. And then the Washington Post comes out with a big story about Governor Walz, talking about his handling of protest and his relationship to Black women after George Floyd was murdered in May of 2020 in Minneapolis. And two of the women who are prominently featured in that Washington Post story are Tashara Garway and Nakima Levy Armstrong, both friends who I've been in conversation with over the last couple of years. They are joining me in this hour, as well as Jerome Richardson. He's also an activist on the ground in Minneapolis. Welcome to the show, Tashara, Nakima, Jerome. Thank you all for being here. Tashara, Nakima, it's been a minute, but when I thought about doing a show on Governor Walz, I hadn't even read the article. I just was intrigued by really what the Republicans were saying about him. Governor Ron DeSantis tweeted that he basically allowed rioters and looters to burn a police station to the ground in 2020. Republicans have been painting him as soft on crime and really slamming him for the handling of protests after George Floyd was murdered. So I knew there was something to this story, and I needed to talk to the people on the ground, not listen to some governor that's in a completely different state. And then I read this article. And the article is very, very nuanced. Obviously, you women, you being Tashara and Nakima, have spent time with Governor Walz. Philando Castile's mom is also prominent in that article. So let me just start with you, Tashara. Seems like you have pretty much a loving relationship with Governor Walz, although you were according to this article, disappointed in the way he supported or didn't support some significant pieces of police reform legislation. Talk to us about your relationship with him.
Well, I met Governor Tim Walz. We were having our movement and impacted families. We were having a action outside of Governor Tim Walz's home when George Floyd was murdered. Tim Walz came out. He stood on the front porch, him and his wife. And I believe that someone was asked to get the organizer that Tim Walz had requested. That action, actually, Black Lives Matter had organized. But someone grabbed me and brought me over there. And I started to talk to Tim Walz about, the fact that our impacted families that had lost loved ones were out there that day. And I asked, could I have a meeting, myself and other impacted families, so that he could understand that there was many more families in the community that had faced the same circumstances as George Floyd family was now facing. Mm-hmm. At that point, he did end up meeting with us over Zoom, as well as having the impacted families meet with him a few other times as well. However, as time went on, it seemed that, after a while, things kind of move on from police violence and other things start being the top subject. And so it was just a little disappointing, being that he showed up to Daunte Wright's funeral and he really gave his word to keep a relationship with the people that are closest to the pain in the community, that have actually lost loved ones, and that's going through a pain that is really, honestly, hard to even put in words. And so then fast forward to this past year, it was very disheartening for me to get an understanding that Governor Tim Walz had threatened to step into a case of a young man named Ricky Cobb II, who was killed here in Minnesota, to have the understanding that he would interfere with justice being provided to a hurting family was really hurtful and mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that Ricky Cobb case. Nakima, maybe you can shed a little light on it from a legal standpoint. Why might, if Governor Cobb did, I'm sorry, not Governor Cobb, if Governor Walz did step into that case and intervene, can you help us understand why that might have happened from a legal standpoint?
Sure. So last year, Ricky Cobb II was driving home on I-94 freeway, and he was pulled over by the state troopers. The state troopers are under the control of the Department of Public Safety, which has a commissioner who is appointed by Governor Walz. And sadly, the state troopers have killed people before. There have been allegations over the years of racial profiling, and that's what I believe happened in Ricky Cobb's case. So the state troopers, white state troopers, pulled over Ricky Cobb, who was a Black father, just minding his own business, driving, and they pulled him over and ran his license, and they found that he had an outstanding warrant. And at the time, you know, Ricky Cobb was really calm, having a conversation with them. He didn't want to go to jail. He didn't want to die. So he's having a conversation with them. And at some point, he started to drive his car away. And one of the troopers actually opened fire, killing him. And so the county attorney, a woman by the name of Mary Moriarty, who is the chief prosecutor for the county, made the decision after consulting with experts and her staff to bring charges against that state trooper. And we as activists and community members were advocating for charges to be brought in that situation because we did not feel that deadly force was justified. So what happened after that was that she did bring charges, but there was a public dispute between Governor Walz, Attorney General Keith Ellison, and Mary Moriarty, because Governor Walz threatened to take the case from Mary Moriarty and give it to Keith Ellison. And we all knew Keith Ellison was not going to bring charges if the governor took the case from the county attorney. So from our perspective, it was very disappointing in terms of how that situation was being handled. And the fact that we saw the leadership of a woman in a position of authority being usurped by the governor and the attorney general was really disheartening. And ultimately, she decided to drop the case right before Walz had stated to the media that he was going to take it. So, for example, he was going to take the case on a Monday. She dropped the case on a Sunday. You know, and that's been a real sore spot. This has all been pretty recent as well.
And the case was never picked up by any other law enforcement agency, no other prosecutorial body?
Absolutely not. We did not. Just the culture here in Minnesota. It took a lot for the county attorney to take the case, just because the culture is one of which there's a lack of accountability when it comes to police officers harming and killing Black people.
So let me get you in here, Jerome, because one of the things in that article is that one of the things that's pointed out is that after several of these high-profile police shootings, murders, that there was reform legislation pushed by Governor Walz around body cameras, around release of body camera footage within 5 days, and some other measures that were applauded by some activists like Vanessa Castile, Philando Castile's mom. She's quoted in that article, and I'm just going on what the article says. Obviously, she's not here. So I have to just assume that the
Valerie Castile.
Valerie, okay, thank you. That the news is quoting her accurately. Now, obviously, the issue of immunity and removing of the statute of limitations and some of the bigger issues weren't passed through the legislation. But what would you say, Jerome, about Walz's efforts to even get any police reform legislation passed through the legislature following George Floyd's murder?
Yeah, I would say there's been an immense amount of just like efforts from both like governmental branches, from attorneys and representatives like Nikema, obviously, and other folks, and community members who have like really stood strong in putting forth policies and lobbying behind things that will really push the narrative in terms of like human rights and civil rights and what that looks like on the ground in Minnesota. And so a lot of times like we see these narratives being told in media and so forth that are really accurate narratives of like the work that was being forth, who contributed and whatnot. And so as you mentioned the name Valerie Castillo and other folks, like it reminds me of like the immense amount of work, and we say this in the movement, like putting our bodies on the line. It's quite literal, like we're quite literally putting our bodies on the line for these various things. And so when you talk about like the policies and the initiatives that have been forth in our government that have brought police reform and restoring voting rights and all these various things, I think sometimes we fail to understand like what the actual governmental branch structure is like how bills are passed and how these various things are done. And I think like social media and these other mediums don't do a great job at like accurately educating people. And so like just to circle back and do the due diligence of like the work that was being done on the ground, like for one, right, people were putting their bodies on the line, and then people were turning their pain into policy, right? And so by that I mean like showing up on the Capitol Round Tundra on the floor, working behind the scenes with legislators to draft bills, individuals like John McCullen and other folks who have really done the work. And so I would be remiss to like not mention and highlight the work of front lines workers, right, as well as just like community leaders outside of the governmental branches, especially right the executive branch and our governor. And honestly, like these bills are not a complete reflection of Governor Walz. I would say they're a reflection of our House floor, of our Senate, and the majority of people who have come together to put these policies.
Well, no, I hear what you're saying, Jerome. You're saying that, bills come to the legislature, they get passed because there's been a lot of hard work by activists on the ground. No doubt about that. And by acknowledging Tim Walz, we take nothing away from the activism and the activation of activists like yourself and others. But I guess what I'm trying to get at, Nikema, is, is there some sense in Minnesota that Tim Walz is a reformer? Is he someone that this community believes has used his political clout, his political position, his political bully pulpit to push forward a reform agenda around policing?
But I think also,
honestly, I would say no. I don't think that people see Tim Walz as a reformer. I think that people see him as having some level of responsiveness when there are concerns. So my first time engaging anything to do with Tim Walz was shortly after he took office. We actually staged a protest inside of his office where we were calling on him as the new governor to do something about the long-standing police issues. He did not come out. I don't know if he was in his office at the time. We did not physically see him. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until a couple years later, when George Floyd was killed, that I talked to him on the phone and urged him to take the case from the hands of the county attorney, who was Mike Freeman at the time, known for not holding police accountable, and to give the case to the attorney general. Not that I have any faith in Keith Ellison as a person, no offense to anyone, but the office of the attorney general has a lot more resources, higher quality attorneys and experts. And, and Tim Walz actually listened. Mm-hmm. He actually took the time to listen as I broke down from a legal perspective why the case needed to be removed. And even the charging decision, that it was an inaccurate charging decision that the original county attorney had put forward. So that was a pivotal moment that I have to give him credit for, because he could have easily in that moment gone along with the status quo. And honestly, Derek Chauvin would have been off, and so would the other three officers. They, in my opinion, if the case had stayed with the county attorney, there would not have been convictions. So he will always have that credit from me. But in terms of the bigger picture issues, I do think that he could have been a stronger advocate when it comes to police accountability and reform, and pushing for the changes that we want to see, that are still yet to happen.
When we come forward, I want to talk about all of your reactions when you learned that he was going to be the VP selected by Kamala Harris. And what do you think the Tim Walz as VP in the White House does on some of these thorny issues around policing, particularly given that he has been, accused of being soft on crime by Republicans, those who say he allowed the city to burn? I want to get your reaction to those comments by Jim Jordan and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580. Stay with us.
More of Areva Martin in real time when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton. Here's the latest on the Black Information Network. A Black U.S. Army soldier who ran across the border into North Korea last year is pleading guilty to desertion. A spokesperson for the Army Office of Special Trial Counsel confirmed a deal had been reached on Monday. Private Second Class Travis King was facing legal troubles before he ran across the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. Diplomatic efforts eventually resulted in King being returned to U.S. custody. As part of a plea deal, King is pleading guilty to desertion, assault on a non-commissioned officer, and 3 counts of disobeying orders. The November election is 69 days away, but voters in several states will be able to cast their ballots soon. Early voting starts next month in Virginia, Minnesota, South Dakota, Vermont, Illinois, and the swing state of Pennsylvania. In October, residents in 9 more states, including swing states Arizona and Ohio, can begin to vote. Nearly every early voting state offers mail-in or vote-in-person options. That's the latest. I'm Amber Payton on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network.
Trouble in Hollywood continues as stop traffic on the 101 South at Santa Monica Boulevard is due to an accident that remains on the right shoulder. Sherman Oaks, heavy traffic continues over 45 minutes from Venice Boulevard. On the 405 North before Ventura has an accident on the right shoulder. More heavy delays continue downtown on the 10 East before Central Avenue as the left lane is blocked during an accident and heavy traffic flow from Lincoln Boulevard is over an hour and a half. Montebello 60 East before San Gabriel Boulevard is giving you a 45-minute backup from Wilshire due to a stall blocking the center lane.
Bank of America has powerful digital solutions for local and global businesses, so you can make every move matter. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. Bank of America N.A. Copyright 2024.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Coco Gauff got off to a good start Monday in defending her U.S. Open tennis title. The 20-year-old African-American star defeated Varvara Gracheva of Russia in straight sets. Gauff, the number 3 seed at the U.S. Open, moves into Wednesday's second round. Gauff plays Tijana Maria of Germany at 9 a.m. Gauff won her first Grand Slam title when she won last year's U.S. Open. The Dodgers and Angels are back in action tonight after a day off on Monday. The Dodgers are at home for the start of a 3-game series against Baltimore. The Angels are in Detroit to try to snap a 5-game losing streak. ESPN rounded up a few experts to rank the top 100 NFL players entering the 2024 season. Here's the top 5. Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson, Cleveland Browns defensive end Myles Garrett, and Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Yeah, y'all, come on. Come to At KBLA Talk 1580, we fight the power every day.
Yeah, gotta give us what we want. Gotta give us what we need. Hey. I listen to KBLA and I love the commercials. I know what the commercials mean. I also, if I'm looking and trying to figure something out, I need something to talk to me that might hit me. And it happens on TV because, every time they show a sporting event, they got the pharmaceutical companies back to back telling people how to fix the sickness on the same stuff that they sell them. So we get it.
Yep, we get it too, Chuck D. And that's why at KBLA Talk 1580, we don't black down.
Drop it! Our freedom of speech is freedom of death. We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power. Fight the power.
Have you heard of the 50-30-20 rule? This can help you spend and save your money wisely. So how does it work? Distribute your dollars into 3 buckets. 50% towards needs, 30% towards your wants, and 20% goes to savings. Use this tool to help your journey to financial success. Sponsored by J.P. Morgan Chase & Company.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles is a nonprofit law firm that protects and advances the rights of the most underserved, leveling the playing field and ensuring that everyone can have access to the justice system. Every year, LAFLA provides free, high-quality legal services to more than 100,000 people living in poverty across greater Los Angeles. Their unique combination of neighborhood offices, self-help centers at courthouses, and domestic violence clinics puts Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles on the front lines in vulnerable communities and at the forefront of change. LAFLA's expert team of attorneys, paralegals, and support staff works to provide direct representation, offer counsel and advice, provide referrals, and educate the community about their legal rights through workshops and seminars. With locations all over LA, you can access their services or volunteer to help no matter where you live. And if you have an urgent issue, call 213-235-0060. That's 213-235-0060. To get legal help, make a donation, or volunteer, visit lafla.org. lafla.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
We are back, and Tashara Garraway and Nakima Levy-Armstrong, Jerome Richardson are joining me. And these are three activists from Minneapolis. They are in Minnesota, the great state where our VP candidate, Tim Walz, hails from. They've had direct contact with Tim Walz. They've worked with him on issues of police reform, and they have different opinions about Tim Walz and his effectiveness and his attention to the issue of police reform. And we're in this moment where people have to decide, is it Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, or is it Donald Trump and J.D. Vance? Donald Trump has told us today that he is going to make every effort, if he's reelected, to kill off the reforms that have been made by the Biden-Harris administration around curbing abusive policing. He wants to provide more military equipment to police. He wants to reinstate stop and frisk. He wants the National Guard to be brought in to cities to fight crime. And we know when he says cities or urban areas, he's talking about Black communities. And Nakima, that raises the question. Tim Walz has gotten a lot of flack by Republicans who accuse him of waiting too long during that protest where we did see that police department that was burned to the ground, of waiting too long to call in the National Guard, for allowing, according to Ron DeSantis, he sat by and let Minneapolis burn. Jim Jordan said he let rioters and looters burn a police station to the ground. What do you say in response to those attacks on Tim Walz? They're from the right, not from activists who say he hasn't done enough. These are folks on the right who says he did too little to protect the city.
Well, I just want to be clear that if it comes down to which it is, right, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, there's no comparison, right? There's absolutely no way that I'm voting for Donald Trump. And I know that a lot of Black folks around this country and in the Twin Cities feel the same way. So the way that I'm looking at this issue is more nuanced in the sense of us understanding why we have all of this exuberance about a new presidential nominee and a new vice presidential nominee, that we can't lose sight of all the unfinished business that still needs to happen if they get into office. We cannot ignore the seriousness of these issues simply because we're excited that Trump has some real opponents. Now, as far as the Republicans who are talking about what happened here, they really can't speak on Minneapolis. They were too cowardly to show up. They have no idea what went on, so they can't even speak about what actually went on. I think that in the moment, Governor Walz was trying to strike a balance in terms of making sure that he wasn't too aggressive, in terms of his response to these very long-standing issues that we were all aware of and that reached a boiling point, which we weren't surprised by. So I think he was trying to strike a balance, and it also wasn't fully his call in terms of what happened. We do have a mayor here, Mayor Jacob Fry, who unfortunately at times seems asleep at the wheel when it comes to addressing these issues in the city that he actually runs. So I think that he was trying to strike a balance, but I do think that there was an aggressive response by the Minneapolis Police Department, primarily to protesters. And many of us also had concerns, not only about the National Guard, but the fact that they were recruiting officers from other jurisdictions out of the state of Minnesota, who we knew came from places that did not have a strong connection with the Black community. So we were concerned about these officers being able to attack us and brutalize us and get away with it because of all of the chaos that was unfolding in the city of Minneapolis.
Tashara, what was your response when you learned that Tim Walz was going to be at the top of this ticket, that he was going to take the national spotlight, that he has the potential to become the next vice president of the United States? And for many people, let me just be clear, we did not know Tim Walz. Tim Walz was not a national figure. And even as Nekima said, we heard a lot more about the mayor of Minneapolis. We heard a lot about the city council members of Minneapolis. So as all of this was unfolding, then we heard about, Keith Ellison, who many of us knew. But Tim Walz is in some ways just being introduced to many folks around the country. So what was your response as you learned that this man who came out of his house and says, who's the organizer, bring her over here, and who you've had conversations with, who you've introduced families who've suffered just immeasurable pain to, talk to us about your reaction?
I can say that I have, I guess it goes into the lesser of the two evils. It gets hard because one part of me feels like with Trump, we know what it is, but it's hard when you have someone that appears to really want to fight for the legislation that families are fighting for to get passed so that other families don't see the same fate that our families have had to see. And then I think what just really blew me out of the water, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Tim. Tim Walz has my cell phone number, and I just haven't been able to speak with him in probably over a year or so. But I'm the type of person through all things get an understanding, and I'm truly blown out of the water with the situation of seeing a family or hearing that the governor was going to interfere in the process of justice. And so with that unresolved situation happening, but then now hearing that he's potentially going to be the vice president, it left myself as well as other impacted families in a really conflicted place. Do we want someone like this other person who is running? Do we want him? No, absolutely not. At the same time, as Nekima just stated, we don't want to have someone in office that, sways away from. We are in a state of emergency here in the state of Minnesota and around the United States with the modern day lynchings and killing of Black men and Black women. We've seen what just happened to Sonia Massey. So the state of emergency that we're in, we cannot sway from it, or we will be facing the same fate that we had after the outcry that we got when George Floyd got murdered. And we got there because of circumstances like Nekima explained, where years beforehand, they were urging the governor to step in, to take certain measures, to take certain steps, and those steps were not taken. And then we got to the murder of George Floyd, where it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And had there been proper things done to prevent this prior to, we may not have gotten the outcry that we got. So that's my take on it. It's a really conflicted place to be in. Really feeling hurt from working side by side, particularly with that particular family as they mourn and grieve. And then having the relationship that was had with Governor Watts, and to understand that he would step in. It's a little bit of a violation of trust. And hopefully at some point he would be willing to speak with our families again.
Yeah, let me ask you real quickly, Nikema, what was the justification for the district attorney in terms of dropping the case? I know you said there was some pressure, like on Monday, Wall said he was going to give the case over to Keith Ellison, but like from a legal standpoint, did the district attorney articulate, why she believed this was not a winnable case?
Yes. Part of what happened was from my perspective, the folks who run the Department of Public Safety did not force the officers to give statements of what happened. And apparently the main officer changed his story or gave a statement late in the process, claiming that he feared for his partner's safety. And that's why he opened fire or used deadly force. And so we were concerned, thinking, well, if you really felt this way, number one, why didn't you give a statement to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension after it happened? And then number two, let a jury of his peers decide. I mean, how many Black men are placed on trial on a regular basis, whereas, hearsay or circumstantial evidence, and they are still being tried with the full force of the law behind them, and a jury is being allowed to decide the circumstances and whether that person is guilty or not guilty. So in this instance, we have seen, unfortunately, this isn't the first, situation like that. It was very similar with regard to the case of Amir Locke. Amir Locke was killed in February of 2022 during a botched no-knock warrant, and his family is still demanding justice. Keith Ellison declined to take the case. I believe that, of course, there were politics involved, but it's a common occurrence here. What's rare is when you actually see officers being charged and convicted. Mm-hmm. So that was the justification, unfortunately.
Okay. When we come forward, I want to talk about where do we go from here? Because there's been a lot of police reform legislation passed at the local levels around this country. Obviously, no federal bill. The George Floyd and policing bill stalled in Congress. But there seems to be less of an appetite, I should say, around police reform. There was the backlash to the protest movement, to the racial reckoning that we saw after George Floyd's murder. So where do we go from here? And what role do we see a Vice President Tim Walz playing in that pathway forward? Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580, when we come forward.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Our daughter Jessie loves playing detective.
But since we discovered she has sensitive skin, we've been playing detective too.
We thought the problem was our puppy.
But it was actually our old detergent. So we switched to Tide Free and Gentle.
Tide Free and Gentle has no dyes or perfumes, so it's gentle on her skin.
If it's got to be clean, it's got to be Tide Free and Gentle. This back-to-school season, Tide and Downy are giving back with $1.5 million in scholarships. Enter to win. No purchase necessary. US/DC 17+. End September 30th. Rules. Tide.com/scholarships/official rules.
Hey, checking in?
This is not just your flu shot appointment at Walgreens.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is getting your entire family vaccinated in one trip.
Hey, Mom?
And a snack on the way out. Get flu shots for everyone in your family. Together. Schedule appointments online today. This is wellness made easy. Walgreens.
Vaccine subject to availability and for ages 3+. State health-related restrictions may apply.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
Linking social justice and climate justice all year long. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, Black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
We are back, and I am speaking with Tashara Garraway. She's the founder of Family Supporting Families Against Police Violence. Nakima Levy-Armstrong, she's the former president of Minneapolis NAACP. She's also a civil rights attorney. And Jerome Richardson is here. He is an accomplished activist, musician, and actor. He was the second youngest person elected to the St. Paul, Minnesota NAACP Youth and College Division, and also is the former executive director of Minnesota Teen Activists. So it's pretty clear to all of us that going back to the outdated, ineffective, oppressive, unconstitutional practices that Donald Trump wants to implement, such as stop and frisk, such as, using the National Guard in cities, deputizing local law enforcement agents to become engaged in, deportation of people. All of those are failed policies of the past that I don't think any of us want to go back to, which is why a Trump, J.D. Vance administration would be devastating to our community, particularly Black community, particularly Black men. So, Jerome, I ask you, what's the pathway forward? What for you would an effective Harris and Walz approach to criminal justice reform look like?
Yeah, I think young people, I can speak on behalf of myself as well as young people, and we're standing up and we're fighting and demanding for these things. I can recall in 2021, Kamala Harris had spoken about and urged Congress to pass the George Floyd Policing Act. And I think by electing the Harris-Walz administration, we'll be one step closer to passing that George Floyd Policing Act. I can also recall the various bills that have been passed in terms of police reform in Minnesota. We talk about the recent bill that passed this last session, was the Emmett Till Lewis Recovery Act, that was designed to support families that were affected by traumatic experiences, that either wrongfully incarcerated police brutality victims, and that was really allocated for the mental health and the wellness of actually our impacted families. And so as I think about the policy that have been talked about from the Walz and Harris perspectives, education funding, expanding healthcare, climate change on a high level, public safety, and all these, I think these are very important aspects that young people are championing, that young people are demanding when it comes to not only on a local level, but also on an international platform. We talk about what's happening in Ukraine, we talk about what's happening in Gaza, like all these issues are very pressing and are going to be the turning point to really push Gen Z voters to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz on the ticket.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Jerome, for giving the perspective of what Gen Z and younger voters are looking for in terms of this election. These are really, really complicated issues, Tashara, Nakima, Jerome. We know that police reform, when the talks of police reform take place, there is tremendous pushback. You have police unions that push back on reform. You have certain segments of the population, even though some folks that consider themselves Democrats. We know that Republicans have had a long history. They have a long history of fear mongering, creating this environment that convinces people that crime is up, that their neighborhoods are unsafe, and that the only way to solve crime is by having more police, by having more oppressive policing. So when you're talking about what it looks like going forward, this is not uncomplicated, Nakima. When police reform efforts, we saw some efforts that were made in your city and around the country, and many of those reform efforts were rolled back, and they get rolled back oftentimes when you change administrations. Even efforts to select or to elect progressive prosecutors. Now in the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, our progressive prosecutor is likely to lose in November because the sentiment of voters has changed. And again, people have bought into this narrative that crime is up and these progressive prosecutors are too soft on crime. And so this is a very difficult issue.
Yeah, I would agree that it's a complicated issue, but I do hold Democrats as responsible as I do Republicans when we are talking about the rights of Black people, and particularly around police accountability. I watched, all the days of the DNC, and you would have thought that the Democratic Party was the party of civil rights and racial justice, when the reality is that over the long history of these political parties, that has not necessarily been the case. Fannie Lou Hamer wasn't even allowed to be seated, at the time. And I would say that unless you are 100% on board with the party's platform, you're going to face a similar response in terms of potentially being ostracized or not being allowed, to speak your piece. And while I could have consistently voted Democrat, I'm not so tied, so locked in with the Democratic agenda that I can't take a step back and see where change needs to happen, and that accountability will still need to occur, especially if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are elected, because too many people are going to rest on their laurels thinking, oh, they're Democrats, oh, they're for this or they're for that. But at the end of the day, our liberation has still not happened as a people. So we have to acknowledge
that. But Nakima, let's be fair about that. The electoral political process isn't necessarily designed for our liberation. So we have a two-party system that is so imperfect in so many ways. And to think that the Democrats, the Republicans, or either of these parties, can lead us to the liberation that we seek as African Americans, I think is a flawed premise to begin with.
Well, I'm not saying they can lead us completely to liberation, Areva, but you recall, and you're a champion for the role that Black women play in helping Democrats get elected. We're always touted as the champions, of democracy, that we're the ones that help. So what are we getting in exchange for that? Right? I think.
Oh, but wait a minute, Nakima.
Visual representation.
We're going to run out of time. You and I'm going to have you come back, because I want to have that. I want to have you come back so we can have that conversation in terms of what we're getting, because I think we're getting a whole lot. Obviously, there's more to be gotten, but I want to give Tashara the last word. We're down to a minute. Tashara, you are a family that has been impacted by police violence, and my heart always goes out to you because of your bravery, your courage, and you keep fighting this fight, not just for your family, but for so many other families. What do you want to see in this administration? We have a Harris Walz administration.
Yeah, I want to see these two people really. I want to see Tim Walz specifically not forget about the people that I said before that are closest to the pain in the communities out here. I want to see him stand up and speak up, not go along with the status quo. I want to see him actually remember that even if this is not the headlining subject, that there are families out here that are suffering, that are living without whole human beings. That's what I heard Miss Valerie Castile say one day. She said, I'm living without a whole human being. I want him to remember that and think about his children. If it was his children that was stolen from him, and how would he fight, and how would he want people to fight for him? You know, like Nakima said, it is Black women that are helping these people get in these seats. And he needs to remember that. He needs to remember the families and the people that are the closest to the pain.
Well said, well said. Always a pleasure being in conversation with you, Tashara. Keep fighting that good fight. We see you, we love you, we respect what you're doing, and we so appreciate you. Thank you, Jerome. Thanks for representing for Gen Z. I love to see that. And Nakima, always a pleasure being in conversation with you, my fellow barrister. Got to have you back to have that conversation. We are out of time, though. Make sure you follow us on all social media platforms at Areva Martin. The next voice that you hear will be Robin Ayers in the Raw Report right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Stay with us. Thanks, God.
Laws invalid has been struck down by a U.S. appeals court. The law declared that certain federal regulations